Hi, everybody. Today is Saturday, June 27, 2026, and our dear friend, Professor Marandi, is here with us. Welcome back, Professor.
Thank you, Nima. Thank you very much for inviting me. I think you have a problem with dates because you were like, today is Saturday. You were very careful to
Because
make sure it's right.
I always compare when I talk with you. I always compare the the date here in Brazil. You know that is different from Iranian date. That's why I'm just thinking of yeah. Let me start with what has happened yesterday. And we had some sort of attacks in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran controlling the Strait of Hormuz. It seems some tankers or ships wanted to pass through the Strait of Hormuz without using the designated routes by IRGC and Iranian authority. And then it was hit, one of them at least close to UAE. And then you see the American attack on Sirik in the southern part of Iran. And Associated Press, just before coming to this live, reported that Iran responded to American attack and by using drones and some targets in Bahrain. What has happened last night? Many people were arguing because we had the announcement of IRGC saying that we have responded to Americans, but nothing of the video footage, nothing came out. And on the part of the United States, the same way. They said that we attacked the Syrian region, but we haven't seen anything. Then later on, they published a footage of a target. It doesn't show that it's Syrian. I don't know what has happened, but there were reports in Iranian media that 2 telecommunication radars were hit by American, missiles. What has happened last night, Professor Marandi?
Well, we have to go back to the MOU. And in accordance with the MOU, the Americans have obligations. And they haven't carried out all of them. They've carried out some of them. They've ended the siege, which has benefited Iran a great deal. Iran has exported a lot of oil, as we all know, and other products, and it's importing goods. It's exported disproportionately a lot of oil compared to other countries in the Persian Gulf. So it's making up for a lot of lost exports as quickly as possible, because at the end of the day, we are facing significant economic difficulties. They bombed our country for 39 days, bombing critical infrastructure. They bombed our gas fields. They bombed our petrochemical plants. They bombed our steel industry. They bombed pharmaceutical factories. They bombed apartment blocks. I met a person whose neighbor was like women had gathered in a building to make like food voluntarily for the soldiers that were manning. They're busy in Tehran at air defenses and so on, and they bombed their building and killed all the women. This person lived there. That person's home was in the same street. So they created a lot of death and destruction. And then, of course, we had the siege, and the siege prevented us from exporting oil. It prevented us from importing goods. So we have very high inflation right now. I think it's something like 70% or so. Which in Iran, inflation has always been high because of the sanctions and maximum pressure, but it's higher now than it usually is, and it will go higher unless the government does something about it. So the export of oil now in large quantities is obviously going to be good news for the government. So the Americans have also removed the sanctions on oil exports and oil-related exports, but they haven't released Iranian assets yet. And contrary to what some people are saying, that this is with regards to what Trump said, that it's going to be to purchase American goods. That's not the case. I've spoken to a couple of people directly involved. They said it's nonsense. But then, and also they have not done anything much on the Lebanese front, and that was the number one article in the MOU. So the Iranians during this period. They allowed ships to go through the Strait of Hormuz, but in the Iranians created an arrangement where it would reflect the degree to which the Americans are implementing their side of the bargain. So what did the Americans try to do? They put pressure on Oman to declare and ignore Iran's mechanisms, Iran's regulations for leaving the strait. So ships began to move in that direction after the Omani declaration, and Iran hit one of those ships and said, "No, you do as we tell you. We're in a ceasefire. You take the route that we told you to take." Then the Americans took revenge and they bombed Iran. It wasn't a major attack. They hit 2 radar towers, but they're domestically made. They're not like expensive or problem. It's not a problem for Iran. And then the Iranians struck back and hit U.S. assets in Bahrain. And by the way, another ship today was struck, another tanker that was disobeying the Iranians. So the Iranians are going to enforce the way in which the regulations which they have declared for ships to travel through the Strait of Hormuz. And as I said, it's going to be reflective of U.S. implementation. If the U.S. implements the deal, then you're going to get more ships traveling easily through the strait. If the U.S. refrains from implementing its side of the bargain, the Iranians are going to be slower in allowing ships to pass through, and ships that cheat, they're going to pay a price for that.
I think what the United States is trying to do in the region with the recent visit of Marco Rubio to Bahrain, Kuwait, and UAE, they're trying to put pressure somehow on Omani government. Is that the calculation on the part of Iranian? How was that perceived by Iranians when it comes to the way, because he came to the region, he talked with Bahraini government, Kuwaiti government, and the UAE, but he didn't go to Saudi Arabia or Qatar. What was that?
Well, exactly, and it's not just that. The so-called deal between the proxy government in Beirut, which was installed by the Americans and does not have a popular mandate. The prime minister and the president are 2 literally agents of the United States. Their fake deal with the Israeli regime, which effectively allows the regime to continue occupying the country, and it's intended to destroy the resistance, that is also a violation of the deal. So the Americans are, by trying to undermine Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, is a violation. Direct threats made by Trump against Iran are direct violations of the ceasefire deal, because he's during the duration of the deal that no threats should be made. This betrayal of Lebanon by the regime is a violation of the ceasefire deal. So the American and by gathering these countries and putting out this hostile statement against Iran, of course, these are all in order to undermine Iran's position in the ceasefire arrangement. And it's the same countries that helped the Americans attack Iran. They signed this text, this anti-Iranian text, and yes, they're putting pressure on Oman too. So the Americans don't want to implement the deal. They want to undermine the deal, but they want Iran to abide by the deal. And the Iranians are not going to have any of that. Some people are saying, what is Iran going to do in response? Iran's response is the Strait of Hormuz. It regulates trade through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran doesn't want to shut down the whole strait completely. So Iran has many calculations. Friendly countries use the Strait of Hormuz, so Iran has to take that into consideration. Some countries want to do deals with Iran. Iran has to take that into consideration. So to a degree, Iran wants to keep the Strait of Hormuz open for its own ships too, of course. But on the other hand, it's going to limit it based on the behavior of the United States. So while the United States is undermining.
Yeah.
Am I back?
You're back. Yeah, you're back.
Okay, so as the Americans have been undermining the MOU at multiple levels, the Iranians are reacting through the Strait of Hormuz, because the Strait of Hormuz is equal to all of those levers or that leverage that the United States has. The Iranians have much more leverage to the Strait of Hormuz itself. So the Iranians are going to continue using that to make sure that the Americans do not get their way.
Yeah. Here is what was reported from the Iranian source, that the number of applicants for passing through the Strait of Hormuz today, has increased. And while you see, because all of these tankers should use the designated routes by Iran, or is there some sort of communication between Iran and Oman? They can use, it's a combination, it's some sort of coordination between the two countries. The other point is Bloomberg reported, as I mentioned before, that Omani government has informed Europeans that they may have to pay fees if they want to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. What was the outcome of the latest communications between Iran and the Omani government and the routes that they have defined for the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, the Iranians and the Omanis do have an arrangement, but that's for the future, because after the 2 months, the Iranians are going to take fees for the ships. Right now, in accordance with the ceasefire agreement, for the 2 months period, they're not going to do so. So the Iranians and the Omanis are preparing for the future. Of course, but the route that Oman declared a couple of days ago was under duress. It was under pressure by the United States. The Americans want for Iran to lose control of the Strait of Hormuz. They want ships to go through and ignore Iran. So by forcing Oman to declare that route, they wanted to put Iran in a difficult position. If Iran ordered the ships to go back and struck a ship, it would be a route that Oman has declared. But the Iranians said, no, we're not going to, it doesn't matter. Even if Oman declares this route, it's under duress from the United States. It violates the agreement that we have with the Americans, and we'll block those ships. So after Iran hit one of those ships that tried to escape, all the other ships pulled back, and then other ships started communicating with Iran saying, we want to, now that they're more worried about traveling through the strait without Iran's permission, they're trying to register their ships for permission to travel through the strait with Iranian coordination. So Iran, there right now there are some small ships that cling to the Omani coast. They go to Fujairah, and then they take some goods or oil, and then they
Fujairah in UAE.
Yes, because Oman controls the Strait of Hormuz, but to the two sides, I mean, people have to look at the map to get what I'm saying, but the Emirates is on the two sides of Oman. So these ships go they go from the Emirates right alongside Oman's coast, and then back to the Emirates to Fujairah. And then these small ships, okay, am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, that's just the connection. So the ships that, these small ships, they cling to the Omani coast. They're not big ships, because big ships can't go there. So some goods are sort of smuggled through without Iran's consent, and then they take that oil and they transport it to larger tankers. A number of ships, I suppose, have to go back and forth to fill a tanker. It's more expensive, time-consuming. Not all that much oil goes through, but I mean, it's not enough. But in any case, there are violations. But in general, the Iranians are enforcing the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz now.
Yeah. Do you think that the case of Lebanon, because last night we had protests in Lebanon in reaction to what has happened between the government in Lebanon and Israelis. Basically, what they're talking about, it's all about Israel staying in the southern part of Lebanon. They're going to back down a little bit to the a little bit to the south. But before Israel leaving Lebanon, which was unbelievable to see the Lebanese government signing that agreement, they have to disarm Hezbollah. And what do you make of what is going on in Lebanon?
Well, first of all, the president and the prime minister of Lebanon, they're not popularly elected. They were imposed on the country by the United States after the first ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. And they are negotiating with the Israeli regimes against their own laws, against the laws of Lebanon. They don't have legal permission to carry out these negotiations. And basically, what they've done is extraordinarily foolish. Well, but of course, they're proxies, they're agents. So they don't have a commitment to the country. The very fact that they negotiated with the Israelis was a big gift to Netanyahu. At a time when Netanyahu was isolated across the world, the Israeli regime is despised. Countries, even in the West, it's increasingly hated. The only country in the world that is moving towards the Israeli regime is Lebanon. The only regime. And what did they get in return? Because this is a big gift to Netanyahu. He can say, look, a neighbor that refused to negotiate with us ever now is negotiating, and now we have an agreement with them, and now they're going to dismantle Hezbollah or whatever. What did they get in return? Nothing. They gave the concession of negotiation. Before, I mean, if they were even half sane, if they were even half patriotic, they would have said, okay, we can, even speaking to the Israelis means that they have to give us a concession, because this is a big gift to the Israeli regime for us to sit down and talk with them. They should at least withdraw from, like, I don't know, 80% of the land, and then we'll sit down and negotiate with them. They did nothing, and they gave that gift for free. And what did the Israelis do in return? Literally a day or two afterwards, they bombed a convoy of the Lebanese army and murdered a lieutenant general and his companions. So, and now basically this agreement allows the Israelis to say, have no doubt, Nima, Israel does not have any intention of ever leaving Lebanon again. Just like they don't have any intention of leaving Syria. Just like they never had any intention of leaving the West Bank. And just as they have no intention of giving up Gaza. So, and that's why Iran is saying that Article 1 of the MOU, they must go, otherwise no deal. So the Iranians have made this a key component of the MOU to make sure that the Americans understood that under no circumstances will this be tolerated by Iran. So the Lebanese government is effectively legitimizing the Israeli occupation and legitimizing its attacks on whoever they want to carry out attacks on. They will have authority to carry out operations. And then, of course, the plan is to create a civil war in Lebanon. That's the whole point, to turn the army against the resistance. And Lebanon does have its proxies. On the one hand, you have Jolani, and right now there's a lot of killings going on in Syria as we speak, for multiple reasons, both against some of his former allies and but also against the minorities. Obviously, he's not going to do anything against Israel. So you have Syria on the one hand, you have the Israelis here. I mean, the Syrian regime putting, Trump saying he'll use them against Lebanon, regardless of whether they even have that capability, which they don't. But they're trying to keep the border shut between Syria and Lebanon to help strangle Hezbollah and prevent Iranian assistance from getting in. And then the Lebanese government, they are now mandated, or they're being pushed to start attacking Hezbollah, to carrying out operations to dismantle them. But the problem is that the Lebanese army is full of people who support the resistance. Half the army at least supports the resistance. Most people in Lebanon are opposed to these policies from all religions and sects and so on. So, Hezbollah is also very wise. They've always had a wise leadership, and they have a very wise leadership. And Sheikh Naim Qasim has shown himself to be a very, very effective leader. I think he was underestimated by some people in the past, and he's shown himself to be very good. He's managed this war very well. He's hit the Israelis very hard, and Hezbollah does its best to make sure that, contrary to what U.S. proxies in Lebanon want, to prevent Lebanese from turning against the Lebanese. But in any case, it's a very complicated situation. But Iran will continue to support the resistance, and I don't think Syria can do much. And Iran's pressure through the MOU on the U.S. continues to be enormous. I have no doubt that trade through the Strait of Hormuz has not normalized. It has increased, but it's not normalized. And even if you include, the Red Sea trade and the trade through Fujairah, it's nowhere near normal. And it's not just oil; it's many products that are supposed to be coming in. So Iran has leverage. That doesn't mean that the occupation of Lebanon is going to end tomorrow or in the days ahead or anything like that. But this is a long and ongoing struggle between the axis of resistance and the Israeli regime, and people have to recognize that the axis of resistance, it's not just firing missiles and drones. It's a sophisticated battle. It's chess, and the empire and the axis of resistance are using all their capabilities against one another. And the axis of resistance, Iran has its strong points, it has its weak points, its enemies have their own strengths and weaknesses. So this is an ongoing battle.
Yeah, actually, here is what Benjamin Netanyahu said. He said the Lebanon deal is a blow to Iran, and says Israeli troops aren't leaving southern Lebanon regardless of what Tehran demands. And in the other part, he says that the only way that they're going to leave Lebanon is going to be disarmament, after disarmament of Hezbollah. And yesterday we had the Israeli Ministry of Energy says that we don't want the entirety of Lebanon, but we have 100% of Gaza right now. We're going to stay there. But, this is, even when they're talking about Lebanon, it's about the occupation and annexation of Lebanon. And you see the government going against the policies of Hezbollah.
Nima, the Greater Israel Project goes to Turkey, it goes to Iraq, it goes to Egypt, it goes to Saudi Arabia. Of course, it includes Lebanon. And the Lebanese prime minister and the president know this. But when all this is over, ultimately, they'll be in their mansions and their palaces in Europe and North America. And it'll be that the millions of Lebanese who are refugees here and there across the world, or living like the Gazans or the people in the West Bank among colonies, or among settlers. So this isn't. I don't consider this to be a blow to Iran. Actually, this is a blow to the opponents of the resistance. This is again reinforcing the point that many are beginning to learn, that except for the axis of resistance, no one else is standing up to the Israeli regime. No one else is defending the Palestinians. We saw that in Syria, this was the fake revolution was never about liberation or freedom or Palestine or anything like that. It was a U.S. proxy. In Lebanon, the prime minister and the president, they're U.S. proxies, and those behind them have no goodwill towards the Lebanese people. And so the people across the region who understand politics are seeing through all this. They're seeing that where the United States stand and where their proxies stand. So I don't see this as a blow. I think actually this is not good. As I told you, as my own opinion, as I said to you after Syria fell, I said in my opinion, in the long run, this is going to hurt Iran's enemies more than it hurts Iran. And it hurts Iran, it's hurt Hezbollah, it's hurt Palestine, it's hurt Gaza, it's hurt the West Bank, because Lebanon was important. But because of the enormous capabilities of these Arab family dictatorships through their media and Western media to demonize Iran through sectarianism, through this sectarian slander and lies and racial lies and religious lies, and they over Syria they were effective in turning many people against the axis of resistance. Now I think people are waking up. They're waking up to the reality of politics inside Lebanon. They're waking up to the reality of politics in Lebanon and in Syria. And I think that in the long run, this is important for people to wake up to see who are the sincere supporters and advocates of the Palestinian people and of resistance to